The influence of the Muslim community spread steadily during the latter years of Muhammad's life. Some clans became Muslims. Arab Christians and Jews signed treaties with Muhammad so they could live in peace alongside the Muslims. Jews and Christians were allowed freedom to practice their religion. The Qur'an makes it clear that they should be accepted by Muslims as the people of the book, or al-Kitab, people, that is, who have received an earlier revelation. Muhammad's charisma, leadership, and wisdom were able to unite people that traditionally had been enemies. However, soon after his death, some of the Bedouin clans began to break loose and go their own way. Under Abu Bakr and Umar, the first two Caliphs, the Muslim army brought them back under control and expanded the empire into the present Gulf States and Yemen. The rules of engagement for when Muslims are required to fight are based on Quranic verses and the example of Muhammad. Under these rules, the behavior of the Muslim army was strictly controlled. Force was only to be used as a last resort, where negotiation had failed. Women, children, the sick, and elderly were not to be harmed. It was specifically prohibited to attack or intimidate soldiers who had surrendered. It was forbidden to deprive the enemy of basic human needs. Water should not be poisoned. Crops and food stores must not be destroyed. Christian and Jewish religious buildings and those who lived in them were to be protected, as long as they didn't foment rebellion against the Islamic authorities. By 637, Palestine and Iraq came under Islamic rule, followed by Egypt and Syria by 641. Many Arabs who had lived under the power of the Byzantine Empire welcomed the Muslim armies as they were fellow Arabs, rather than foreign oppressors. The coming of Islamic rule marked a decisive shift away from the Caesar-like rule of the Byzantine religious political rulers. Any idea of the divine right of the emperor was removed. Thus Islamic rule was a liberation towards a more egalitarian society, in which everyone, including rulers, was subject to the divine guidance of the Qur'an. Iran was the first non-Arab country to come under the Islamic Empire in 650. Parts of North India came under Islamic rule from 712, with the city of Multan in the Punjab, now Pakistan, falling in 773. The Islamic Empire spread up into Central Asia through modern Turkestan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan by around 750. To the west, the Muslim armies had passed right along the coast of North Africa, through Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and into Morocco by 714. The Islamic Empire expanded by force of arms, but that is not the same as conversion to the faith of Islam. The vast majority of those coming under Islamic rule at this time were Jews and Christians, and so they enjoyed the freedom to continue to practice their existing faith. It was to take many generations and centuries before a majority of the inhabitants of the Arab lands would become Muslims. In the empire, the people of the book could freely practice their religion, but their status was not equal with that of the Muslims. They were not allowed to have a say in the government. They could keep and repair their existing places of worship, but they could not build new ones. They could pass on their faith to their children, but not try to convert people. they had to show respect for all Muslims, and were sometimes made to wear special clothing identifying their religion. They were not required to serve in the army, but had to pay an additional military tax. The Muslim army was obliged to protect them like anyone else. In fact, they were called the protected people, or Zimmis. When the Muslim armies reached the city of Jerusalem in 637, in recognition of its importance, the Caliph Umar himself negotiated the handover to the empire. The Christian patriarch took him on a tour of the historic city, which included a visit to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Umar declined to offer his formal prayers there. This was not out of disrespect, quite the opposite. He was guarding against someone in future generations claiming it as a mosque, because the Caliph had prayed there and seizing it from the Christians. Umar went to pray on the nearby Temple Mount, which under Christian rule had become a desolate area. Later, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which marks the spot where Umar prayed, and the nearby Dome of the Rock were built. The Dome of the Rock was actually decorated by Christians, the most skillful craftsmen of the time. As the Muslim armies spread out of the Arabian Peninsula, not having the necessary experience to administer a vast and growing empire, they kept on the existing Christian administrators and set new guidelines for the way that the administration was to be conducted. The Sunni ruling dynasty, the Umayyads, made Damascus their capital from 661. Here they found a more developed city life than in Medina, which was too remote. Damascus had been an administrative center of the Byzantine Empire. The administrators there were Christians who knew Greek, Syriac, and Arabic.